Hey everyone, welcome back to the Lookout. Today's election day, and we figured that there's lots of things that are better to watch right now than red and blue numbers and all that stuff that's going to be unfolding for a long time. So, welcome to the Lookout. We're going to talk about wildfire hazard. We figure you can trade your election anxiety for wildfire anxiety because we've got red flag warnings for a large portion of Northern California and critical fire weather conditions coming for Southern California. So I thought I'd get my friend Tim Chavez on the horn here and ask him, he's going to talk about kind of the history of red flag warnings, but also talk about Santa Ana winds in Southern California and what they mean, and just kind of a primer on fire weather in Southern California. So welcome, Tim. Great to have you back again.
Hey Zeke, how's it going, man? Good to
That's
hear from
great.
you.
Yeah, glad you're here with us. Well, take it away. Let's talk about fire weather.
So the Santa Ana, yeah. Anybody that's fought fire in California for any time at all knows that when it gets to be September, October, November, December, um, you either have fires and they're Santa Ana wind driven, or you pretty much don't have any fires. That name Santa Ana is kind of interesting in and of itself. Um, there's some pretty good evidence that it really doesn't have anything to do with the Santa Ana River or the Santa Ana Canyon, which those two things kind of run between Riverside and Orange County, and the wind does howl through there. But I think the name comes from kind of a perversion of the Spanish name for Satan because of the hot and dry conditions. So when I was a young firefighter, the guys never said Santa Ana. What they said was Santana, with no space. So that to me meant, that it had more of a Spanish origin. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's kind of what I've I've seen some papers to that effect, and it could be true because the Spanish explorers, a lot of their journals have references to these hot, dry winds in the fall and winter. Um, Matter of fact, the highest temperature ever recorded in California was during an offshore event off the coast of Santa Barbara. Some ship recorded 130 plus degrees, and birds were falling dead out of the sky around the ship because of the hot air. So I kind of think that's where it comes from. Um, as far as how it's definitely a seasonal event. It's fall and winter only. After April, the occurrence of Santa Ana basically falls off to zero. The the peak month for Santa Ana is usually like January or February, but that's the that's the main decision point for the Santa Ana is what comes first? Does the rain in the fall come first, or do the Santa Anas come first? And the same is true in the North Sacramento Valley. The north winds that blow from Redding through down through the wine country. Do you get a good rainstorm before? And if you do, you're gonna get north winds. But if they happen after the rain, no big deal.
Mm-hmm.
But if they happen before you get any substantial rain, then that's when we had the outbreak in 2016, 2017, all those fires in the wine
Mm-hmm.
country. So same down here. But we very rarely get significant rain before December, before Thanksgiving. Very rarely in Southern California. So usually the peak of the Santa Ana season, my friend Bill Weiser and I always used to complain because we always missed the World Series. It was almost always the last week of October. We miss so many World Series because that was the peak of the event. And what it is low pressure that this time of year can take two paths. over water or over land. And if the low pressure that's driving the system at 500 millibars up 18,000 feet through the atmosphere, if it travels over water and then comes on shore, then you're going to get a good soaking and your fire season's over. If the track goes inland through the Pacific Northwest and into the Great Basin, which the forecasters usually call an inside slider, that's the situation that creates the pressure patterns that cause the offshore flow. And if you have high pressure in the Great Basin at the surface, and then this low with a ridge that is kind of over California, but dips down into the Great Basin at the 500 millibar level, that's what they call having upper level support. And that is usually when we get a good blow. And apparently that is what is happening Wednesday and Thursday this week.
What'd you say? Mid 500 millibar is what kind of support?
Upper level support.
Okay.
Yeah, upper level support is when the pattern is perfectly formed over so that the isobars are directly north and south over California at the 500 millibar, or actually northeast southwest at the 500 millibar level. So,
do you have any graphics that kind of show that?
Yeah, let's see if I do. Well, you know what? Let's just look at the GFS right now because.
All right. Andrew Clofus says, "Hey Tim."
Oh yeah. Let's see here.
And this is our first ever live stream via Zoom, so we're working out the bugs, but it seems to be working.
Yeah. Okay, let's see here if we got. No. Not model points. 500 millibar, North Pacific. Uh, 12Z, 18Z. Go 18Z. Okay, yeah, this is a pretty good example.
Right.
Let me share my screen. Are you seeing that?
Yep. Yep.
All right. Well, this is the global forecast system. This is kind of the main model that everybody uses as their first opinion, and then they go to some of the other models if they, want to see what the spread is. But you can see how right now today the flow, this low is coming into the Great Basin. And let's look at, here's the perfect example. Tomorrow, let's see, this is 06. So this is tonight, and you can see how the wind barbs, this is at 18,000 feet through the atmosphere. So this is the upper level support.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see how the wind barbs are directly north and south over Northern California.
Mm-hmm.
And then as the event progresses, you can see how now this is tomorrow night. You can see how now the wind barbs are kind of northeast over California, northeast to southwest.
Okay.
And the gradient is really strong. In other words, the pressure difference between the Pacific Ocean and the Great Basin. So that's what the upper level support is. And then at the surface, let's look at the surface. Let's look at later. Tomorrow 18. That's pretty busy, but you can see how um, there's high pressure over the Great Basin and low pressure off the coast. And so now you have that airflow established both places at the same time. It's a little hard to see because it's pretty busy, but
Okay. You
anyway.
just pixel shamanry around here. We were talking the other day about how we interpret all these weird, like hard to read images, and then like stand up and give a briefing.
Yeah,
It's
right.
like modern day shamanism. All right, so what do you got up next for us? Talking about Santa
Well,
Ana's.
I was gonna show you a couple of the tools we use to kind of grade the event. So the forecasters at San Diego and Oxnard are kind of talking about this, kind of talking up this event, even though it's short duration, it's a pretty significant event. And Drew Smith, who works for LA County Fire, kind of likens it to the similar conditions that during the Woolsey fire, which was a major fire in the Malibus and the Santa Monica Mountains, um, the same day as the campfire in Chico.
Yeah.
Um, so one of the tools that we use to kind of evaluate that is this. Can you see this Storm Prediction Center pressure gradient tool?
Yeah.
It just measures the pressure difference at the surface between all these different places. And the one I like to use is between Tonopah, Nevada, and LAX. So it measures, and you can see right now the gradient is minus 2.9, which is not huge, but pretty significant. And then up here, these are the models that are here's the GFS, the rapid refresh, the North American model. And then the times are over here, and of course they're all in Zulu time, but this right here is tomorrow,
8 a.m.
8 a.m. And to see a minus 20 right here, minus 20 millibars between Tonopah, Nevada, and LAX. I don't know if I've ever seen a minus 20 before, because usually at minus 15 is when we start freaking out.
Hmm.
So again, this is a model. They're very often wrong, but you can look at the spread here, minus 13 on this model, minus 15, minus 20, minus 17, minus 14. Those are all pretty significantly big numbers that represent, how much difference the pressure is between Tonopah, Nevada and LAX. So pretty significant. If just looking at these numbers, these are big numbers.
So where would you draw the gradient for, like, if we wanted to look at something like the campfire for Northern Cal?
Oh, let's see. This tool is it's almost too simple to use, but you have to pull a location down here. So let's see, I would go to Sacramento,
Okay.
XTO, and then it gives you all these choices. And
Hmm.
probably what I would use in that situation is maybe Medford to Sacramento.
How about, and just because it's north, it looks like Medford and Winnemucca are like the same, minus 18.
Let's see. Yeah, we got some pretty big numbers, minus 15. This is Winnemucca to San Francisco. Let's look at what were we saying?
Sac, Winnemucca to Sac.
Winnemucca to Sac.
I don't see it.
Oh, I might have to go to look at just straight up north south, Medford to Sacramento. 10.9. That's pretty good. Is the wind blowing up there today?
Yeah, it blew hard today from the north.
Yeah, that's a pretty good gradient. And usually the colors kind of to give you a clue. Like when you see this dark red color, that's pretty significant. So this is like right now. This is tomorrow
So yeah, it looks like it
or
kind of.
later tonight.
So it's kind of peaked for us.
Yeah, I think it kind of has, according to this.
So and then can you look out into the future with this and say like, show me this in 3 days?
It only goes out depending on how far the model goes out. So let's go back to LOX
Okay.
and then LAX to Tonopah.
Someone says there's 32 people watching. We got some competition on the media space tonight.
I guess so. Yeah, you can see the NAM 40 goes out quite a ways. So this is 11/8, which is Friday,
Hmm.
12 Zulu, which is Friday morning. The gradient drops down to 11,
So
and then
it's,
it kind of drops off to nothing.
so it's a pretty good tool then for just kind of giving you an idea of how long your blow is going to last.
Yeah, I mean, and you can see from it's basically starting right now. The peak of the event is 11 tomorrow morning, and then it tapers off. Then it kind of builds back up on the 7th, and then it kind of tapers off to nothing. So yeah, it's pretty good, pretty useful. Not too hard to understand. Another one that I really like is the Fire Weather Snooper. Do you know that one, Zeke?
Yeah, and that's so. There's one I can never find the one for NorCal. Do you just have to
So
change that from
in my
LOX to STO?
in my previous job, you can search for just like STO Snooper probably and find it.
Hmm.
But in my at the Wildfire Threat and Forecast Wildfire Forecast and Threat Integration Center that I worked at the last couple of years, we built a statewide one.
Hmm.
So this is the statewide one, and it doesn't show anything too significant yet, but it'll color up the
Yeah, I've seen
different
that.
weather stations depending on if they're flirting with red flag conditions, if they're showing red flag, right? Or and then it'll show like it'll highlight the wind speeds as the wind speeds are coming up. Today's kind of the transition day. So like Whitewater, California, west northwest 16 to 28. That's a normal day in Whitewater. Let's see what else. Anything else significant? Oh wait, this is the LOX one. I don't know why I have this one up. Thought I had the statewide one. But anyway, all these snoopers are all pretty good.
Hmm.
They just show you the current conditions though, not a forecast.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can find. Oh, here's the statewide one. Let me see if I can drag it over there. Yeah, you can see this is a statewide one, and it also has a map that shows you the areas where the stations are starting to color up.
Yeah, Chico Airport.
Yeah, you can see Chico Airport is 19% humidity and 23 gusting to 28. You got
That's the time that it hit that. So
this
like,
is pretty much, yeah, the time is right here where the observation comes in. The ROS stations only give an observation once every hour, but the utility stations are like every 15 minutes or every 5 minutes.
hmm.
So it just depends on how frequently the observation comes in. And then the red, means that depending on the area, and then if you hover over the station, it shows the last 24 hours of data, so you can see how the conditions got worse and worse and worse.
My chair's squeaking over here. Sorry.
That's all right. I can't hear it. It's up out of my hearing. So this is a pretty handy tool. I like this tool a lot. And it comes from this page right here, the Wildfire Forecast and Threat Intelligence Integration Center. There's a bunch of tools in here that you might poke around at, you know.
I'll put that in the chat in
Yeah.
our comments here.
Yeah, I can put the I can copy these links and send them to you or whatever. And then another one I really like that's really graphic and really shows what's going to happen is it's called the CANSAC. It's the California, Nevada. I can't remember what CANSAC stands for.
It's a good acronym.
Yeah, California, Nevada.
That's just what I call the bag when I go out to scrounge aluminum.
Yeah, right. It's a special model that the DRI, the Desert Research Institute in Nevada, runs, and it runs at a really high resolution, and it also runs really frequently. So this is Southern California. Tomorrow morning at 4 in the morning, and the color, as you get into the purples, it's 40 to 50 miles an hour, and then it's got the arrows so you can see where the areas that are being impacted. And so at that time, it looks like Central Riverside County, Orange County, and LA and Ventura County are the most impacted. And these purple numbers are worrisome because that's the sustained wind speed. It doesn't, and the gust, is going to be significantly higher than that.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And what's WRF, like WRF?
so the WRF is a really high resolution. It's called the Weather Research Foundation. It's just a really high resolution one of the weather models, one of the many weather models that's out there. And then there's one more that the SDG&E has been in collaboration with UCSD and created some of these high resolution, lots of information, graphics on Santa Ana winds. So this one here just kind of shows from Barstow to Santa Ana. They've created this thing called the Experimental Santa Ana Index. And it just shows you when the event's going to peak. So it looks like San Diego County is going to get a second peak Thursday morning. And then the winds are going to stay pretty strong. But unfortunately, this display kind of only shows San Diego County, or kind of is focused on San Diego County. But again, it shows the probability of the event, whether it's going to be strong, moderate. And it looks like it's going to be high probability of a moderate event and like a 20% probability of a moderate to strong event. Let's see. Look at northern San Diego County. Yeah, it looks like the peak of the event, and it looks like pretty strong, is like Thursday morning. Antecedent predicts the strength of the event. So, and this is also based on the WRF, but it's a special model that SDG&E and UCSD have collaborated. Scripps Institute of Oceanography have collaborated on. So I like it because it gives you a good idea of what the possibilities are, the mean, the minimum, and the 10th and 90th percentile. So, the black line is kind of the most likely uh, possibility, and then these are the outliers.
Okay.
So, anyway, those are the ones I look at whenever something's coming.
All right.
How do I give you back to you?
You can just turn off sharing.
Get back to. Stop sharing.
All right.
Did that work?
I'm still seeing your screen here.
Let me do this. Let me make you the host. How's that?
Great. All right. Let's see. Well, that's good stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, if you think about the major fires in Southern California in the past 50 years, kind of the thing that brought the wildland urban interface into focus has always been the Bel Air fire, the 1961, the 1970 Malibu fires, the siege of fires we had in the 70s. Those kind of really brought to attention to the general public and to the politicians that there was a really serious fire problem in Southern California. And what do we do about it? Well, come out of that has been Fire Scope, which is a major initiative to organize and improve the fire services in California. The Chapter 7 of the California building codes came out of those fires. So some major policy changes have come out of those historical fires that happened, and unfortunately they keep happening over and over again. And I don't know if the loss, I've seen some improvement in the structure loss in more modern houses, but the problem is the housing stock. There's so many older places that have been built in the 60s and 70s that are in the urban interface that they're always going to be there, and they're always going to be kind of a problem.
Where's the Bel Air fire?
So the Bel Air fire was in the hills above Beverly Hills, in LA and West LA in like 61.
There we go.
Yeah, right around the Hollywood sign, actually. Yeah, there it is.
And it came down into the city.
Came down into the city, burned, 1,000, I don't know. I can't remember how many houses, but, because the media market in LA and because all these were, fairly wealthy people, it really, it kind of started the ball rolling for all this stuff. And then the 70 fires were the ones that really kind of turned the tide. And
Yeah, there's a lot of fire in the 70s. So I think what's interesting about this is just if you look decade by decade,
yeah,
this is like 1960s, 1970s, 1980s, 90s, 2000s.
yeah, unfortunately, there's not much that hasn't been impacted by. And we have fires all the time in California. Some of them get big, some of them don't. In Southern California, we have two kinds of fires. We have the June, July, August type fires that Sometimes they get big. Most of the time we, 99.9% of the time we catch them. But then you have the September, October, November fires. Those are the ones that usually do most of the damage. If you
And
look at, I
we
can't,
did that. We
no,
don't put them out until the wind stops blowing.
yeah, you have to wait until the weather changes because if you get in front of them, the outcome's not gonna be good. They're moving fast. They're spotting miles in front of themselves. Um, you know, 90 93, the cedar fire that you have shown right there, we all thought that would be the biggest fire that we would ever be on in our life because it went 19 miles in one night from the high part of the Cleveland National Forest to the ocean in one night. And it burned up, I don't know, 230,000 acres or something like that.
Yeah.
We never thought there would be a fire like that again. And unfortunately, they've just continued to happen.
Right. Well, then 2007, you had the witch fire right next to
Yeah.
it.
And the Wahito right next to it.
Well, yeah, I think one of the interesting things is just that sometimes you got three of these going at once, right?
Well, that is the problem. Whenever you have the fuels conditions, which that's the other thing that historically happens in California is the bottom of the fuel moisture curve in the live fuels in the brush in Southern California happens at the same time as the beginning of Santa Ana season.
So you're saying that the
So
live vegetation is at its bone driest right
it's
before this happens.
it's nearly dead. It's so dry. I mean, I've seen measurements down in the 40s and 50s, 40% or 50% live fuel moisture this time of year. And so combine that with, winds that are 40 gusting to 70, and you are not going to stop this fire until the weather changes. And then you get multiple fires going in the region, and immediately what happens is you run out of crews, you run out of air takers, and eventually you run out of engines. And there's just not enough equipment and people and resources left to mount up a good initial attack.
Right.
So multiple fires get big at the same time, and resources get stretched way thin. I was telling you earlier about a fire I was going to at the same time as the Cedar Fire called the Paradise Fire. And I was the division supervisor on day 2 of the Paradise Fire. And I had a Nevada Division of Forestry engine, a contract engine, one hand crew, and me for 19 miles of fire line. So needless to say, we didn't get much done that day.
Right. And then as soon as you kind of start to get a strategy together, the onshores come back and your fire spreads to the east.
Well, that's the other thing is it's easy to get focused on the active part of the fire, that's burning houses and burning towards the ocean. But if you don't close the back door the first couple of days of these fires, they turn on you. When the onshore flow comes back, when the pressure in the Great Basin weakens and the onshore flow comes back, it pushes the fire the opposite direction. And if you don't have some line built and some containment on the eastern edge of your fire, you know, Stephen Rucker died when the fire went back to the east above Julian and burned up out of a canyon and burned up his engine company. He died because they didn't have, not that it was anybody's fault, but they just didn't have that piece of fire on the east side of the fire secured.
Yeah. So here's where the cedar fire. Sorry about this lady's hair. We made this map during the cedar fire. We were there. I was there as a contractor, and then this was in an exhibit at. There's some museum in San Diego that had a fire exhibit. This is the only place I can find that. Now, some of these maps, they predate the PDF file,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So it's hard to track down the original graphic. But anyway, fire started here, and this is that run you're talking about, 30 miles in 15 hours. But then on the 27th, 2 days later, it started going back the other direction, right? And so Rucker died out here near Julian, right?
Yep.
And so, yeah, it's pretty typical. You see that big push, and then it turns around, and all that heel becomes the head.
Yep. And it can be abrupt, but the only good thing is that when the onshore push does happen, usually 24 hours later or 36 hours later, the fog comes in and your fire lays down and it's over until the next time. Most Santa Anas that I've, most of these fires that I've been on that are Santa Ana wind driven, there's about 72 hours of really serious, tremendous firefighting, and then the fog comes in and kind of they lay down. They don't go out, but they do lay down, and you get a chance to get around them. But by that time, 72 hours after the fire start, usually you have enough resources on scene to mount a credible attack, and you get some line put in, and then it's just a matter of connecting the dots. But
Well, so
usually for 72 hours or so, you're in a serious firefight.
Yeah, so here's the Laguna fire, 1970, 175,000 acres.
Yeah.
And it's not like this stuff is, hasn't happened before, right? I think something like this happens and we tend to be like, oh my God, it's climate change. It's like everything is new and scary. And it's like, well, no, the only difference is that between this fire and that one is there's more homes, more energy. If we hadn't had all the homes to protect on the Cedar fire, maybe it wouldn't have burned. Like, so many resources end up not being available for perimeter control because we're sitting in a driveway, right, or actively saving homes.
And because of the cyclical nature of these events, you have areas that have recently burned and are not going to be available to burn for a couple of years. So you get a fire start in another area where the brush is older and that fire gets bigger. Every fire is a puzzle piece. And if you have a puzzle piece that hasn't burned in a while, that's where the next fire is going to be.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Look at that right there.
So that's burned since, right? But that puzzle piece
Probably
was filled.
Woolsey.
That was station fire.
That
filled
was
in
a
that
station
piece.
fire. Okay. Yeah.
Well, that's right. Like you see how old fire scars stop subsequent fires often.
Yeah, they definitely slow them down. They don't stop them as much as they used to, but they definitely slow them down because there's just not as much fuel there. And, the reaction is they burn, Bobcat kind of burned that piece in between. Literally, it looks like a jigsaw puzzle sometimes.
Yeah, here's station
And then
2009, so 11 years later, Bobcat.
go to a little bit east right there where you're at. And that's where the bridge fire was just recently.
Got it. Okay, so yeah. Right. So you had nothing in there for the last 40 years or more.
Yep.
All right. Well, you want to talk a little bit of red flag warnings? Thanks for the Santa Ana lesson. So to review, Santa Anas are caused by a pressure differential. Get high pressure that moves in over the Great Basin, low pressure. And so you're saying if the low pressure is moving in from the north, it doesn't bring the moisture. And so that's why we get that setup. So you can have a Santa Ana with low pressure that's off the coast, but then when that comes in, it's wet.
Yep.
Okay. And so we're looking for that setup where you've got the flow coming straight down over the continent.
Yeah.
That's why we get this kind of real dry conditions before the peak winds.
Yeah. Yeah, at the surface, the high pressure's in the Great Basin, but at the 500 millibar level, the high pressure is basically directly over us with the isobars pointing directly north and south. That's the worst case scenario. So red flag warning. The red flag program started again, another policy thing that started as a result of the fires of the 70s. Um, it started out as kind of a public relations or a way to inform the public of this severe situation that's coming. Then it kind of morphed into a fire preparedness, for firefighters, and now it's kind of both. Um, every office has different red flag criteria, but essentially it boils down to winds that are 30 miles an hour or greater and humidity that's 15% or less for 6 hours. Every office has some variation of those numbers. Um, the, the wild card for the red flag program is that the entity that declares a red flag warning is not always the National Weather Service. But the National Weather Service doesn't always have a great handle on the fuels conditions. So, like I said, these Santa Ana type conditions can occur September, October, November, December, January, February, March. But when they occur in January, February, March, April, usually the fuel conditions are not uh, capable of carrying fire. So they know they don't usually issue a red flag warning. But it's in that shoulder season where maybe we've had a spritz of rain and maybe there's a change in the fuels. Maybe there's a sprout of green grass. Um, that's when the fire agencies and the National Weather Service really have to coordinate and get on message and make sure we're all talking about the same thing. Because if the Weather Service just unilaterally starts issuing red flag warnings, but the fuels won't carry fire, then they lose credibility because nothing happens, and vice versa. If the fuels conditions are there and the red flag and the winds are there, but they don't issue, which that hardly ever happens. Most of the time, I don't want to say they over alert, but they tend to be on the kind of liberal side, uh, because some of the offices feel like if they don't have a red flag warning out and they miss a fire, they feel like they didn't do their job. And I don't exactly share that opinion, but some of the offices do feel that way, like they have to have a red flag warning out before a fire. And the thing about the fire business is if you have terrible fire conditions and super dry fuels and really strong winds, but you don't get any ignitions, you're not going to get a fire. So how do you account for that? That's the problem.
Sorry, I'm trying to show some stuff here. Um, yeah, yeah. So we've been talking about that a little bit here on our Twitter account. Like this is our current conditions here in kind of the western Sacramento Valley and the North Bay, and we can see it's really dry.
Yeah.
Like in the teens, down around around towards between Napa and Fairfield. It's not. It's cool, right? And these are in Celsius, so I can't really tell you. Um, damn you, PG&E. Uh, but it's not exceptionally windy right now. I mean,
But it is
there's
super dry.
super dry, yeah. But I think what's one thing I think I was talking about a little was on. I'll have to load up Twitter here to make my point. But but looking at kind of what we call antecedent fuel moisture, like this is we I think we tend to be triggered by these like memories of 2017 and the Tubbs fire.
Yeah. Oh,
And
yeah.
so that people say, "Hey, this is the worst setup we've had since the Kincaid fire or the Tubbs fire." And it's like, well, yeah, it's true. Like we are going to have these high winds, but like if you look at the conditions we had in the week before the Tubbs fire, like the low temperatures were like almost 60 degrees, and the high temperatures every day were 70 to 75 to 85 degrees. And the average humidity that week before, like it was bottoming out between like 10 and 20 every day for a week.
With no recovery at night.
Yeah, well, the recovery was like, yeah, up to 40. It's like
Yeah.
nothing, right? And the fuel moistures were hanging like between 3 and 5. And so if you look at that versus like this, what we've had in the last week, let's see. This past week we've been like our temperatures have been between like 45 and 65, and our RHs several nights have like hit 100%.
Some places got a little bit of rain, right?
Yeah, yeah, and then our fuel moistures where they were 3 to 5 in 2017, right now they're like 9 to 25,
Yeah.
and so that really changes the fire picture. Yeah, we could have fires screaming in the dry grass directly aligned with the wind, but I think especially a short duration event, it's just not going to overcome that those. And we even have a little green up with that moisture.
Right. And this is like the second or third storm. Like most of Northern California has had not a lot of rain, but somewhat less than an inch over the last 30 days or so.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes a big difference. The other thing is this time of year, yeah, there might be one fire, but you're not going to get an outbreak, a siege of multiple fires, in those kind of conditions.
Right.
Um,
Well, I
so
think and I think it's illustrative too when you see like a high risk box. So I made a kind of flip comment on Twitter just about how they're not really considering antecedent fuel moisture conditions, and then a meteorologist said, "Well, actually, here's the fire weather operating manual, and look, we are looking at this stuff. One of the sources we can use is the 7-day fuels forecast from NorthOps. But when you see like a high risk day sandwiched between two yellows, basically,
yeah.
that tells you something. The yellow. There's a better page for this. Let me bring it up. 7-day.
Well, let me just say this. One thing you got to remember is the National Weather Service and the Predictive Services folks have two different missions, right? The National Weather Service is the authoritative source for all weather information. Predictive Services tries to weave together not only the weather, but the fuels, the regional and national fire resources situation, the strategic big picture. So sometimes the predictive services and the National Weather Service won't exactly agree or won't be completely in alignment. I mean, they do a coordination call every day in the morning and try to stay on message, but they do have different missions, and people have to remember that.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So, yeah, for example, NWS, if there's a yellow day in here, they can take that as evidence that the fuels are dry enough to support wildfire spread. But then predictive services, if it's yellow, they're saying, well, it may be dry enough, but it's a low risk overall
Right.
of us getting a major event. I always like on this page. I always like to just read you read the weather, but then come and read the
Discussion.
fuels, the weather, the fire and fuels potential, and that's when they say like, "Hey, we're not really worried about this or that."
Yeah, one other thing I always look at or think about whenever you get, again, we're in the shoulder season. It could go either way, especially in Northern California. It's not quite lined up exactly for a major outbreak. Is think about, I always try to look at what has the initial attack action been like in the last week. Northern
Yeah,
California has had virtually nothing that has gone more than a few acres in the last week. Southern California has had a few fires, but still, I mean, we had one that was about 40 acres in Banning yesterday. Um, but there hasn't been much initial attack.
Right. Yeah. Look at this. This is initial attack activity for all agencies in the last 7 days. There's been 46 fires for 133 acres.
Yeah.
In the last week, we've had 7 Forest Service fires for 6 acres. And so, yeah, and so it is kind of, I understand the needle that these folks have to thread and not wanting to miss
Right.
um, a potentially serious event and alerting the public. But like right now, I was out today looking at a fuels job here in Chico, and the person I was out with was calling their contractor to like have them stand down because of the winds. And so these forecasts, and there's purely because it's been designated a red flag warning. It felt cool and moist, and I think if it wasn't officially a red flag warning, like the city wouldn't have felt compelled to shut their contractor down.
Mm,
But these words have a meaning for risk managers, and I think
right.
that in that desire, and it's such a tightrope that everyone has to walk. Like we're trying to get resources together to do some burning later in the week, and oftentimes what we see is that if there's a red flag warning in the North Bay, they'll shut down burning in the Klamath, 200 miles away. And so I'd like to see us, I understand it's a really difficult needle to thread, but I'd like to see us get more spatially explicit in these kinds of forecasts, just so because we have such limited windows to get mitigation work done.
Yeah, that's a tough one. You're dealing with politics and decision makers that don't want to be that guy, that made a decision that went bad. Everybody's afraid to make a mistake and get sued. That's just the atmosphere that we live in. But um, yeah, I get it. It's tough to be riding the beef when something goes wrong, but sometimes you have to trust your gut. And most of the people that are making the decisions they're not firefighters. They're not the people that are on the ground doing the work. There's 2 or 3 levels up, or maybe not even in the fire service in general. Maybe they're air quality people. Maybe they're county government types.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that are making the call because they're gonna eventually ride the beef if something bad happens.
Where's that term come from? Riding the beef.
I don't know.
I don't think I've heard that one. I've heard that from you before. I think it's frustrating when the stuff gets kind of amplified on Twitter by all sorts of different people, with that feeling like these people, they aren't fire people. Like you'll see people circulating the red flag warning map, and then you'll look at some webcams or like red flags for the North Bay, and then you look at like the Atlas Peak webcam, and it's like green, like all green up, and it's
Yeah.
like, did these folks even look at the webcam?
Yeah.
Well, anyway, I think I guess you could say I don't have a lot of skin in the game, right? It's easy to. I think you're right. It's easy to sit back and criticize this, and it's like, well, I'm just some guy sitting in my shack, right? Like the only thing that I feel I go out on a limb a little and say like, oh, this isn't going to be a big deal, and then I hope that nothing bad happens.
Right.
So potentially dangerous situation for SoCal. Can you talk a little bit about how these things unfold? So we're supposed to have a big blow tomorrow morning. Um, I think it's interesting reading like the Cedar Fire report about kind of independent action and how the whole kind of overhead team type structure doesn't really help you out for the first couple days. Can you talk a little bit about just the reality of rolling a ton of resources to a going incident with no real span of control, and maybe tell us a couple stories?
Yeah, big fires like this in the first burning period, which is, until the next morning when the sun comes up, uh, they're mostly organized chaos. I mean, you don't have enough, you you can't get in front of it. You're not going to put it out. Your best bet is to flank it, but in the meat, but at the same time, um, you have lives and property that are at the head of the fire that are going to be impacted, and you need to do something about it. Classic example is all the campfire resources basically switched to evacuation and life safety, and perimeter control was not even a third or a fourth or a fifth thing on the list. No perimeter control got done that first day, and a lot of fires are like that. Uh, I remember going to fire at Banning in the early 90s. Uh, Immediately overwhelmed the initial attack. You order more resources, 10 engines, 20 engines, 30 engines, 40 engines, and at some point the number of resources that you have overwhelms your ability to manage them. That just happens all the time. On every one of these big Santa Ana wind driven fires. That's a normal situation. So uh, I don't people don't like to hear this, especially our managers and our battalion chiefs and chief officers. But at some point, you kind of have to take independent action. You have to do the right thing for the right reason at the right time, without any explicit direction or instructions. And I remember going up to a house up above Cherry Valley, and the fire was coming hard, and it was an old wood frame structure, and the only thing we could do is haul all their possessions out on the front lawn and cover them up. And the house burned down, but all their possessions were still there the next day. So, um, you do stuff like that, or you do selective backfiring around stuff that breaks every rule of what you're supposed to do when you're lighting fire in an aggressive manner. You're supposed to let everybody know around you. The division supervisor has to approve the plan. Everybody needs to be briefed. It has to be approved by the incident commander. None of that is even a possibility when these fires are burning. You kind of do what you got to do to not only save yourself, but to try and save, people and people's property the best you can. Sometimes you're successful. Usually in these type of situations, you have a lot to gain and not much to lose, because if you do nothing, all their stuff's going to burn down anyway. And if you try to do something and you're a little bit successful, then you count that as a win, and you move to the next house and do something there. So yeah, those I remember going to a fire down in San Diego, northern San Diego County, um, early 90, like 93 or 95, something like 96 maybe. Uh, and we had the wild animal park was about to be impacted, and it's chaos. There's one thing that immediately happens is the radio traffic gets totally saturated, and you can't get a word in edgewise. So, me and Bill Weiser, we started putting fire on the ground, and we turned it around. The wild animal park saved a bunch of houses, probably. I don't know. You never know really what the outcome would have been if you hadn't been there. But yeah, I mean, a lot of it depends on people making good judgment, people making good calls, or, sometimes the best option is to do nothing and let the fire go by. And then what we call fire front following, we go in after the head of the fire, which a lot of times is just as dangerous because of power lines and, damaged trees and all that. But you go in after the fire front goes through, and a lot of times you can save a lot of structures just by putting the fire out on the fences or on the decks before it gets to the main house. So I've done that a few times too, where you put a fence out, or you put the fire that's in the mulch creeping around in the guy's front yard, you put that out, and the house is still standing the next day, because if you hadn't done that, probably the house would have burned down.
So
So it
once
is
you
the
were kind of
case.
a battalion chief, um, what kind of like were there ways that you worked with your engine captains to kind of talk about lessons learned and kind of good ways to take independent action? Or is it like, do you feel like, I feel like storytelling is like one of the best tools we have for kind of helping people think this way. Have there been kind of efforts you've been part of that have been kind of organized around helping train people? Is that like the firefighting and urban interface? Do you guys cover a lot of that kind of independent action?
One of the best things we did was I had a very minor part in it, but a big group of us wrote after the Esperanza fire. A big group of us wrote the Wildland Urban Interface book. I have one right here. Oh, I thought I had one. I thought I had one right here. But anyway, Cal Fire, we wrote a Wildland Urban Interface book, and we tried to pass along some of these, you know, not well. They're what you call low frequency, high risk type deals where you might get to do this maybe one, two, or three times in your 30-year career, but to pass on some of that knowledge about seeking refuge, temporary refuge, and firefront following, and some of those kind of tactics and strategies. And um, I think that was one thing that was pretty successful to pass on the knowledge that some of the older guys had. Um, but yeah, you're right. Storytelling really is sometimes the best way that people learn. And then the capacity of a good engine captain to pass along knowledge to young firefighters on a really significant incident, you never forget those lessons, and I remember going to fires as a young firefighter and seeing the guys do some of this stuff, and then when I was the engine captain, that stuff pops into your head. Oh yeah, I remember we did this and we were successful. And so that's a lot of how knowledge and skills get passed in the wildland fire service is just experience. Experience is a great teacher. You can teach a lot in a classroom, but experience is really the best.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff, Tim.
Yeah,
And you're still doing it.
good memories, good times. Not so much anymore, man. You got to pass it on to the young. It's a young person's game. This is a young person's game. It not only physically you can't do it anymore, but it's just mentally the the ideas and stuff just don't come to you as fast as they did. You're not able to improvise as fast and on your feet like you used to when you're 30 or 40.
Just riffing. So to recap, this event that's coming right now is super strong, not super long lived. Um, has it been kind of hot and dry ahead of it? Like what's it feel like down there?
It kind of has, yeah. I mean, I live in Hemet. We haven't had any significant rain. I mean, we had a shower a couple of days ago that lasted a couple hours, but the amount of rain we got was in the tenths, you know. Um, so you know, usually you think until you have what I look for that sprout of green grass underneath the brush. Once you have once you have 1 or 2 inches of green grass, pretty widespread, all over the place, your fire season's over. But we don't have that yet.
Mm-hmm.
Soil is bone dry. The brush is, crackly. So again, it just depends if we get an ignition. Maybe we'll go 48 hours and nothing will happen because nobody does anything stupid. There's no accidents, no power lines, no welding or cutting, people doing dumb stuff with metal weed eaters, you know.
Yeah, I've been wondering about that. Like, so there's been literally billions of dollars spent on vegetation management, on infrastructure hardening, and I am wondering if that's really playing a role now in seeing less ignitions during these critical events.
Statistically, I would say it has to because of the amount of roadside stuff we've been doing and the amount of around communities. But uh, you can a lot of times you can see the effects after the fact when a fire burns through an area, and you can say, "Yeah, we did fuel modification here, and it worked really well." The mountain fire up above Idlewild, they had done pretty significant fuel reduction around the town of Mountain Center, and it saved the town. And there's stories like that over and over and over. But so it's having an effect, and it probably has a reduction in the ignitions, because there's not as much fuel available.
Hmm.
But uh, ignitions are a really tough thing to get a handle on because they're so random. They tend to occur in patterns, but still they're pretty random.
We're doing a wildfire protection plan for Shasta County right now, and I think I've been cynical. For my whole career, I've been pretty cynical about our ability to mitigate um, fuels at the scale of the problem.
Yeah.
But right now, we're doing a community wildfire protection plan update for Yuba County and another one for Shasta County, and I've been surprised. I mean, you can really see there's been such a huge investment in fuels work, and it starts to be significant at this landscape scale. I think that the part of me that's still cynical is thinking like, well, are we going to sustain this level of investment? If we don't have more campfires, more Woolsey fires, more Tubbs fires, we're still riding this kind of wave of post-fire interest. And in these places like Shasta County and Yuba County where we're working, it's so productive. The vegetation grows like crazy. And so these projects, they disappear quickly.
Maintenance.
But we're seeing some communities that with the level of compliance with defensible space has really gone up. And I think more than anything, it's the insurance companies. The people we're talking to, they said, yeah, my insurance company told me I had to cut all these trees. I think CAL FIRE still doesn't want to write tickets. They're spending more energy on defensible space, but they're still not keen to write tickets, where the insurance companies are just like, oh, you're going to lose your coverage if you don't cut these trees.
Ultimately, that's the bigger stick. A CAL FIRE ticket for not doing your weeds is a couple $100, but you lose your insurance, that hurts. So a lot of people think that the insurance companies are going to end up driving this whole, fuels management thing eventually, and I kind of tend to believe them.
Yeah, well, they're the only people that can tell the truth, right?
Yeah.
There's so many politics that prevent people in the agencies from coming into a community and saying like, you guys are screwed. Like, we're not going to be able to save it, right? And then the
Right.
insurance company can. It's in their interest. They have to do that.
100%.
Well, I'm afraid that if we get off this broadcast, I'm going to have to look at the election news, and I'm not ready.
All right. Well,
But I think we've talked this one out. It's an hour. I think an hour is enough talking.
all right. Zeke.
I'll check in with you if we'll give you a call if there's smoke in the air,
Okay.
and we'll give you a call anyway. I'd like to have you on. We got to do at least like 3 or 4 times a year.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Always a pleasure, Tim. Thanks for coming on.
All right, Zeke. Take care, buddy.
All right. See ya.